Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to the Heartbeat. Today we're going to be talking about episode 4 of season 1 of HBO's The Night Of. Join me, won't you? So, if I can make it through an entire season of a television show without labeling any one of its episodes as simply a filler or setup episode, then I'm a pretty happy viewer, and thus far, halfway through this first season of The Night Of, I am very happy to report that none of its episodes have been just that, which has primarily been accomplished by its writers structuring and presenting each step of these characters' journeys as more than simply a means to an end. Every one of them, just like the step previous, and just like the step to follow, made uniquely important and interesting as the writers implicitly affirm that the journey to a destination, to a verdict, or to a reveal can leave as indelible a mark on an individual as the destination, verdict, or reveal itself. And one of the ways that this show encourages us to engage in a character's steps, no matter how small, is by having them walk alongside others who are traveling the same road, bringing in a common idea or theme that unifies their disparate plot threads and makes that specific episode feel more self-contained and consequently satisfying. And though this week's primary idea and theme has been touched on previously, on this 4th episode of the series, it was specifically pronounced, that being the cost of help. And obviously on this episode, at the top of that enduring the cost of help list was Nas. Every relationship that he began or continued to form came with a price, or at least flashed a price tag, making the reference to The Other Side of Midnight extremely applicable, as that book focused on a young girl who her entire life was shuffled like a pawn in a game being used by one powerful person after the next, ever trying to figure out how to exert her own will and power in the midst of those controlling and manipulative relationships. So, while in prison, even as Nas came to learn that the cost of Freddy's help really was nothing more than what sounded like anyways private tutoring lessons, he also understood that were he to accept it, he would then be associated with and in debt to a man who didn't think twice about using violence and intimidation to get what he wanted, something that was quite aptly captured as Freddy beat a man, his blood both literally and metaphorically ending up on our hero. And that was something else that this episode captured quite well, just how sometimes the more logical course of action can appear quite repulsive, while a more foolish path can appear quite attractive, all depending upon who presents it and the manner in which they do so. So for Freddy, even as he offered the most comprehensive form of prison insurance, his sales pitch was undeniably creepy, corrupt, and just all around unappealing. Well, this week, Calvin's advice seemed to be going for the much more appealing price of free, the man rarely appearing to desire much more than a connection with someone who was as unjustly convicted as him. Though, as it turned out, it was quite the opposite, Calvin seeing Nas as nothing more than a stand-in for the man who had killed his niece, one on whom he could, quite literally, pour out some of his wrath. But Calvin wasn't the only one out to use Nas this week, as our hero did find plenty of individuals outside the walls of his prison, so very willing to charge him for their help. But once again, even as it would have been nice just to hate Alison Crowe for her very demeaning, two-faced behavior, talking one way to Nas's face and a very different way behind his back, seen most especially in her very flippant bargaining with the district attorney, which she later presented to our hero as a hard-earned victory, there was still something very tragic in how that very quickly detected hubris ended up tainting what might have been Nas's best chance at getting his life back, 15 years down the line instead of 30, and that tragedy wasn't solely affirmed by Stone's corroboration of Crowe's advice either, but also by those men in that bar, individuals who had no personal connection to the case, but still took the time to repeatedly say about that deal, "What a gift from the gods." But there again, Nas, like so many of us probably would have, reviled that very logical deal because of the hideous way in which it was presented. And just as Nas was tossed from one lawyer to the next, so this week Stone was forced to bounce from one dermatologist to the next, paying the price for their help, as they, like Alison Crowe with her cruel comment about him, tore down the competition, promising that their way would lead to the freedom from eczema and embarrassment that Stone so longed for. So beyond paying the price for help, it was that longing for freedom that tied Stone and Nas together in this episode. Both men struggled, and both men struggled alone, which was captured quite simply and beautifully as both lied in bed, staring at the ceiling, those around them really failing to comfort or connect in a way that they really needed. And while on the topic of Stone, I just have to point out how great it was to have that mirrored scene at the top of the episode where the lawyer finally had to admit to himself just how different Nas really was from those that he more often represented. Criminals who, without an ounce of credibility, also stated things like, "It was like a dream. In fact, I ain't even sure if it was me." And walking away from that interaction, even as the camera framed Stone in a way similar to when he first reflected on seeing Nas in that holding cell, he wasn't the same man that we'd met 3 episodes ago. This was now a man who, even as he tried to return to his old ways, couldn't, because he'd now entered the fray, really desiring to overcome his physical and emotional eczema. And even as he and Alison Crowe have both been shown to be quite the manipulators, less interested in practicing law because they believe in justice and truth, so much as they believe in prestige and money, the difference between them, which really did grow a fair amount this week, was seen most clearly this episode in Stone's examination of Andrea's life compared to Crowe's examination of her death. For the latter, the court case and its verdict were as final and unchangeable as death itself, whereas for Turturro's character, there maybe, just maybe, was some hope left to be found. And it was that outlook that led to the introduction of a couple of new players this episode, the two arguing men at Andrea's funeral, and I'm sure it's far too simple, but they did quite quickly move up my murder suspect list. Of course, I'm not saying that a little bit of sleuthing suddenly redeemed Stone completely, or that he's now ready to do more than just call that pound to check on that cat, but actually act on its behalf, or that he's done charging others for his help, like this week's client or Chandra. And speaking of Chandra, I am so very excited that she is taking over as Naz's primary attorney, really seeming to be the only character to offer her advice and help for free. Though in the coming weeks, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we discovered that she has some sort of deep, dark secret, and if that's not the case, I have no doubt that she'll just join the ranks of innocent bystanders getting scorched by the inferno that is Naz, which was exactly what we saw at the top of the episode with the tattooed inmate being forced to abandon our hero, lest he quite literally get burned too. But the group of characters that I continue to feel the most for are the cons. Not only are they having to pay up the nose for a lawyer and the help that only she can provide, but they also, without receiving anything in return but shame, are having to pay the price for their son's actions. And that shot of Mrs. Khan, as well as the one of Nazir's brother, were all we really needed to understand what this experience was doing to them. It wasn't just Naz's home that was being labeled as one of a murder suspect. It was theirs as well. So guys, before I close things out, I just wanted to take a second and kind of just more candidly say to you, thank you so much for constantly watching these videos, for clicking those thumbs up and for sharing. All that so genuinely helps. This isn't my full-time job by any stretch of the imagination. I have a couple of other jobs that definitely dominate my time, and this is kind of just the side thing, but I would really love it to be the full-time thing, and I'd love to continue to invest more and more time into it and really produce stuff that I'm proud of and that you guys enjoy watching, and I can't do that without your help. So I wanted to thank you, but also say continue to push forwards with me. Click those thumbs up. Share this as much as you can in your Twitter and your Facebook. All those little things do genuinely help. And I want to make this a thing that we're all proud of and we continue to move forwards in together. So thank you, and let's continue to strive. Those are my thoughts anyways on this week's episode of The Night Of. I would still love to know what you guys thought of the episode, so comment below and let me know. How's the series coming along for you? It was recently announced that they might actually have a season 2 of The Night Of. How would you feel about that? Definitely comment below and let me know. Also, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.